Welcome everyone! For the ones of you who don't know me yet, my name is Zucconi and I'm a lecturer in artificial intelligence and a science communicator. Now, if this is the first time you're watching, a warm welcome to Gamedev Graveyard. This is the weekly show where we talk about failed projects and games that didn't make it and prototypes that never got released, post-mortem, you name it, we try to cover it. Now, as always, we have the chat. Feel free to say hello, feel free to ask questions. I will do my best to reply to all of them. I'm always saying that, but then we never got comments, so maybe I should stop saying that. Prove me wrong today, prove me wrong. I'm really excited today, I'm really excited this evening because we have a guest that I've been wanting to talk to for quite a long time. And this time we have David King. He's a lecturer and the course leader of the MA Games Design at the London College of Communication, which is part of the University of the Arts London. It's also one of the colleges where I was teaching myself a few years ago. So David and I have been working together in the MA Games Design, and this has been some of my most fun times in higher education. So it's really excited for me to have a chance to have him here and have a chat about games and, what else? David is also one of the most prolific game developers I know, and I know a lot of game developers. He has been make dozens of games. They're all at different levels of completion, but I think, despite that, he's still a very creative person and he has created so much content online, and even more content that unfortunately we've never been able to see because it's never been released. So hopefully tonight we will be able to see how it works and ask him questions and see where the conversation goes. So without further ado, let me introduce David King. And hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me on.
No worries.
I'm all right, thanks.
It's too hot.
How are you?
The sun it's like 27 degrees in London today. Like I can't even. But not much you can do. Yeah. So, David, do you want to introduce yourself? Maybe say a bit about yourself, what you're doing.
I guess I make games and I teach other people how to make games. I go across digital and non-digital stuff. So I make board games as well, card games. I've dabbled in making role-play games, but a lot of sort of digital experimental stuff tends to end up as puzzles more often than I want, but
I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with that.
And yeah, and then teaching, I sort of focus on trying to get people to make lots of little games and lots of experiments, which works for some people. I know some people out there want to go away and make big epic games, and that's great, but I like making tiny things.
I think that's actually something interesting. So I'm scrolling now through your itch.io page, and you can see there's a lot of content. There's a lot of tiny games, and I think that this is something that is somewhat recurrent in the stuff you do. So you tend to focus on very small projects that you can usually do in like a week or two. And I remember these because when we were working together, every week it was like, Alan, there's a new game. I have a new idea. I need to implement this. So why do you think is that? Why do you think you focus on small, tiny projects?
I think it's because I think I have a lot of ideas. And the only way that I get to even do a fraction of them is if I make them as small as possible. And the smaller they are, the more likely I am to be able to move on to the next one. I find the start of a project far more exciting than the end, and that's why I think I use itch.io to put a lot of my games up for free, because the other side of games design is sort of like the business side, and I feel like the effort that goes into sort of that level of game is so impressive, like that people can set up business and companies and studios and pay people wages and make money and advertise. And I'm just amazed by that. But I'm really glad that I don't do that, because that would be triple the effort that I already make, and it would take away time from making games, solving problems, and yeah, just experimenting.
Yeah,
Really.
I think it's quite interesting because, like as you mentioned, I'm working as a lecturer as well now at Goldsmith, and it's something consistent. Is that students, they really want to make big games. They really want to make, like, oh, I have this idea for years, and now it's the time. Now I have like 3 months for my final project. I can finally make the game I always wanted, and consistently, the biggest, the simplest and most effective advice I think we can give to students is like, don't make your dream game yet. Ever.
Ever.
Don't make it. Never
Never.
make it. Never dream your
Yeah,
dream
never
game.
make your dream game. Yeah, I think it's sort of a lot of my time as a lecturer is spent projects, and sort of try to get to them to find out what is the most interesting thing for them. So it's not always about making a big thing, but it's about exploring something really deeply and but quite quickly to see what's in there and see what's really important. So say, like, if someone said to me, "Oh, I really want to make an adventure game," I would ask them sort of like which bit of the adventure game do they want to make, and sometimes it is that
All
they
of
want
it.
to make the whole thing, all of it. But then it's sort of like, well, is it the narrative that's interesting you? Is it the combat mechanics? Is it the crafting? Is it the exploration of the
Pick
world?
one.
Be-
Pick
yeah,
one and
I
do
mean,
half of it.
yeah, especially when you're studying on a course where you've got like a limited time to do a project. If you've got 3 months and you're maybe one person, maybe two people on a team, then you can't do everything. So I think shrinking it down and finding something small and important to you. And if you do want to go off and make sort of games with larger companies, then you can be the person who's focused on that one aspect. Or if you want to be sort of an indie designer, you can make really sort of bespoke, interesting things that are going to capture maybe a smaller audience, but they're really going to get into what you've done.
But I think that something quite interesting to me is that a lot of students, I think they have this idea. Well, first of all, because they're very passionate, so they want to make big games because that's maybe what they like to play. But also, I think that part of it's because they don't know what it takes to make a game, so they've never done one, so they have no idea how much effort goes into actually making a game. And I think that in that respect, that's a big problem, and it's something that in a way they have to sort of fail on their own to learn, how long it takes to write code, how long it takes to debug, how long it takes to make stuff. And I think that it's not something that they can often appreciate, I guess.
Yeah, but sort of counter to that as well, sometimes I'm massively surprised by the students. Like I might be telling them, "Oh, scope it down, make it smaller, and they'll push themselves and surprise me with doing something that was much bigger and grander than I thought was possible." But it's kind of like balancing risk and reward with that. The risk is if you go for something too big, that you might not get to the end of it. But there's still all the work that went in on the way, and still all the learning that you did to get to the point that you did, even if it's not a finished thing.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. I always try to be very conservative with my students and like do do less, because so at least I'm sure that what they the thing that they can produce, it's the very core, the very essence. If they have a gigantic game, then there are so many mechanics, and probably you're doing half of them badly. Because you don't have time to do all of them well, or to test them to see what combinations work and which one don't work. I always try to say condense it in something tiny, really small, because so it's also the purest form that you can do in that game. And I think that in these you've been really good, because each games you have done is very unique. Of course, they have similar aesthetic, similar style maybe, but I think that they distill a unique mechanic, a unique gameplay. And so maybe, something that I think we should definitely ask, I cannot invite you without talking about this, is of course Tiny Island. So do you want to tell us a bit about Tiny Island while I'm showing on screen?
Um, I mean, what I guess the idea started with me just doodling in a notebook and sort of drawing out little simple islands on a grid and trying to work out what looked nice and what sort of felt interesting. And then I sort of very quickly started building and developing something digitally. And this was I first started on it like I can't remember if it was a year or two ago now. Whilst I started hearing a lot of stuff about roll and write games, which is sort of like an area of sort of tabletop games where like you roll some dice, you look at those dice, and depending on what they say, you might write something on a bit of paper. You can all share this experience, and then you sort of, after the game, you add up the points to see who wins. And I was playing a game called Welcome To, which had was using cards instead of dice. So it was partly inspired by playing that to try and do something with drawing instead of just it being about numbers and sort of grids. I wanted the end product to be something that was aesthetically pleasing, and that was really important for me when I was coming up with the point scheme for the game, which went through a few iterations. And because of playtesting and all the people who gave me really valuable feedback, and people really dig deep into sort of like the meta of the game and working out the maximum scores for the daily challenges. But I spent a lot of time drawing islands without a point system and making islands which I thought looked nice. And then from that, I worked backwards to find the point system which I felt would encourage people to draw the islands that I liked the look of personally. So that's why like forests near mountains score quite well, because I quite like the look of them. And only one church per island, because I didn't like it when there was more than one church. And I mean, some things make sense, like houses being near a lot of different objects, but then I found out that I didn't like it when there was lots of houses on an island, so I had to balance that with trying to encourage players to spread them out. Again, waves I didn't feel look nice next to each other, so I created rules which pushed the waves apart from each other. So it was really aesthetically driven, which was something I hadn't done in that type of game before. And I think the reason that it sort of had the success it did, and it's by far the most successful thing I've made, was a combination of it creating something that is aesthetically pleasing and also having a daily challenge where people could come back and people could start comparing what they were doing.
I find it really, really interesting because I'm going to say something very mean.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about aesthetically pleasing, and I know this is something we're discussing before. So I'm hopefully it's not too harsh. The individual elements of the game, they're crap. As in, like, they're very simple. They're drawn in a very simple way. But the fact that the game is consistent, it has a consistent aesthetics, a consistent palette, it makes it good. This is why I think aesthetics, trumps every single time. Good graphics. Sometimes good graphics is a way to hide the fact that your game probably has nothing else to offer. And I think in your case it's the opposite. You've gone as simple as you can be. All the things are drawn as a child would, but together, it's such a nice style. It's so cute.
Yeah, I mean, it's because I can't draw.
Well,
And so I sort of like, I go two ways with my sort of general aesthetic. And I think you're right that aesthetic and fidelity, like graphic fidelity, are two different things. Um, I can't draw, so I either just draw everything twice and then make it have a wobbly effect, just because I think that looks nice, or I use geometric shapes a lot because like the computer knows what a square is, or a triangle, or a circle. You can't go far wrong. And then as I've sort of more and more realized that sort of like use black and white and at most one other color, sometimes very rarely two, because like I struggle with color palettes, so I I don't have any color in a lot of games, or I just use one color where I can. In any game that I have used color, you sort of go like, that color's probably not the best color. I also fall back on sort of like the pure colors, like cyan, magenta, yellow, red, like the full blast colors.
And I think it's quite interesting because you're saying, oh, I'm not good at art and stuff like that, but I have here on screen some of the tiny islands drawing that you actually made, based on tiny islands that you have played, and I think they're adorable. I think they could literally be in a gallery because they're simple, they're consistent. You can sort of imagine stories around that, and I think it's one element that I've seen a lot of people doing. So people taking screenshots of their own tiny islands, posting them online, and then writing stories around that. And it's something that I found myself doing as well. While I was making those islands, I was like, why there's a church here? Why people build a church here? And so, out of the blue, I was sort of inventing, role playing, if we can say, Tiny Islands role play about, why those choices, because I'm forced to make those choices. I think that's a very good aspect of the game. I cannot do whatever I want. I'm forced to follow a certain rules, and then I have to design around those rules, and it forces me to create stories, I guess, with those kind of things. I'm not sure if I would have the same, with absolute freedom in a sense. And I know it's overall, I think it's quite nice to see how many, hundreds of people are posting those islands and, making stories and writing about, oh, this island and this other island and stuff. What was your experience? Were you expecting this kind of reception for the game?
No, not really. So just go back to one of your earlier points before I answered that, was sort of like the drawing I did was the main reason that looks okay is because I got some nice felt tips from the art school at university, which just instantly make things look a bit better if you get some slightly more expensive felt tip pens. But regarding the reception to Tiny Islands, I was really blown away. I'd shown it to a few friends, and they said they'd enjoyed playing it, and they shared a few high scores with me and gave me some good feedback. And then I put it online, and then it sort of took the usual curve that my games take. Maybe I get like 50, 100 or so people playing it, or I did back then over the period of like a few days, and then it tapers out. And then it goes down to like 1 or 2 plays. But then it got some coverage online in Rock, Paper, Shotgun. And then it took off. It sort of like, I was seeing lots of games designers who I follow online and who I admire, who I talk about in my classes, academics who I talk about in my classes as well. And they were sharing their sort of Tiny Islands back, and I was just, it was really exciting. So I think it just hit something right. Like everything just happened to align at that moment for some reason, which was really really nice to see.
So it's basically these your Angry Birds. Oh, we have someone else drawing it. So is this basically your Angry Birds, done after hundreds of games that people don't see, sort of hidden the what people only see like the successful game, but they don't see how many. I think, David, I think you've done hundreds of games. Like at this point, I'm not, between
Uh,
digital and paper prototypes, you've done hundreds.
I've started hundreds.
Okay. Okay.
I've probably finished about 10.
Well, also, the question is, when is a game finished, right? Um, it
I mean, even to any standard, like even to any metric, a lot of them definitely aren't finished.
But I think that you're in between a sort of, everybody's talking about the idea guys, as the the most hated category again, in the game development ecosystem, and if you haven't heard of the joke, it's basically people that have a lot of ideas but have no skills to implement them, and so they sort of say, I have an idea, can I have 50% of the game revenue? And I'm like, no, you cannot, because that's not how it works. An idea is worth nothing if it's not properly implemented, if it has no backed. And I think that you're an idea guy that knows how to make stuff, and you're making stuff. And and I think it's that probably what more people should look for. You don't make giant games, you make tiny ones that they work. Well, not all of them, are successful, not all of them works as you want it, but I think that they're all interesting one way or another. They all have something that makes me want to play them in a way. Maybe just for one session and then never again. But in a
Yeah,
way
yeah.
they sort of worked. And I think this is what it's probably what makes them interesting. It's making tiny things as a design, as a design principle. So going
Yeah.
tiny rather than making something gigantic. And I think it's, in a way, it's your secret and a secret of a lot of other people, because if it works, it's a start, it's a very good start. If it doesn't work, well, you failed early, you spend a week on it, and you
Yeah.
get used to release stuff. I feel I have the opposite problem. When I work on a game, I can't finish it, I can't release it, because I'm never happy. And in a way, tutorials are good because I know that they're never going to be finished. They're just a section of something
Yeah.
decontextualized. So I'm very happy to release them. So in a way, I feel that
I,
that really works.
it's actually kind of like my work, how I work on quite a lot of the games, with the exception of some of the more recent ones, is that I will have an idea and I'll work on it maybe for a week, 2 weeks, maybe up to a month. And then I'll get to the point where it's like, I should really finish this. And then I'll start something new before it's finished. So Tiny Islands lay dormant for maybe 8 months, maybe a year, where I'd sort of like almost finished it, but it didn't have that level of polish where you could share it with the public. And it didn't even have quite enough polish when I did share it with the public. Um, I got a lot of feedback, a lot of very sensible criticism about some of the systems and controls and how the rules were described. Because I just picked it up and I was like, I just want rid of this. I want it to be done. I want it to exist. So I spent this is after like the 8 months or however long it was. I spent 3 nights working on it just to get it to a point where it finished. So I do that quite often, where I'll have something that I started ages ago, stopped working on, see it, and I think, I just want rid of it. I'm sick of it. And the only problem with that is that then people give you feedback, and then you sort of feel like, oh, maybe I should improve it. But I mean, that's good and that's important work to do. But I find it frustrating because, like, once I've had the idea and proven that it works, like I've proven that the systems work, it becomes a much bigger slog to finish it. It becomes much more like work as opposed to fun experimentation with mechanics and systems and solving problems with code. And it becomes more about like, how do I teach this to the player? Which is what I'd spend most of my time persuading my students to do. And so I understand their pain when I say, no one would understand how to play your game. It's
Yes.
great. It's great underneath,
Yes.
but you're designing this for a player, and okay, you can complete it, but it's unlikely that anyone else will.
You design it for yourself. Yes, I think it's a big problem of, especially of students that they have like, a shooting games or something like that. They become so good at their own game that they've lost sense of what it means for a new player to start, and they can't play testing properly anymore. And so it's like, oh, this level is very easy. No, it's not. But you've played it. You've played
Or
consistently.
maybe we're not very good at games.
Well, I'm
Maybe
terrible
we're
at
just awful at games.
I'm terrible at games. I had few people say, "Oh, Alan, do you want to live stream while you're playing games?" No, for fuck's sake, no. I can't play games. I'm terrible at all games. So I don't. I will leave people in the illusion that I'm good at playing games. But so I think that while we can have a sort of ASMR moment while I refill my tea. I don't know if people can feel it. We have a couple of comments. First of all, thank you so much, Pierre Mizzi, for the nice comment. And we have a question from Sarah Whiteman, and basically she wants to know on Twitter when a mobile version of Tiny Island is coming, and I want to know that as well, David. When is coming on mobile, especially because it has recently come on printers. So
yeah, I mean, everyone's got a thermal printer at home, haven't they?
Everyone's got a thermal printer to print tiny receipts with your tiny islands. So when is it coming on mobile?
When?
Be very careful, David.
I mean, I'm not going to say a date. I mean, it'll come when. So there's a problem. I probably need a little bit of funding to be able to make it a commercial product. But in order to get funding, I have to do work to pitch, and I want to do it. I think Tiny Islands is the one project I've made so far that's worth doing it with, but I'd still a little bit of me would rather just keep making little bits of nonsense rather than sort of like putting together a pitch deck and a breakdown of costs.
So you're tired already of Tiny Islands. You move on to the next thing.
Never say never. I mean, I'm slowly working on it, and I think I would definitely like to see it on an online store at least.
What I found really criminal, David, and you know that because we talked about it, I find it criminal, is that the game itself doesn't have any chance to share your islands. So people have taken screenshots, and there are hundreds of them. This shows that it could have been millions of them if they had like a button. And to me, I remember that when we were working together, I was keep saying, David, where is the in-app purchases? You know, where is the undo button for $1 for 1 credit? You know, like Tinder. You know, you can swipe back and undo your previous search. You know, something like that. And the conversation was always getting, the same. It was like, we know why, because we both hate it. Like that is the same thing I'm mentioning, consistently in those live streams, is that I love making games. I hate selling games. I hate all the things that are necessary for a game to be successful, like the marketing, like the saving systems, like the share on Twitter and Facebook buttons, like the leaderboard. Yeah. I hate them because they're not fun to play and they're not fun for me to do. And I think that, you seem mostly driven by passion and fun, whichever form it means for you. So maybe that's something that happens to you as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I sort of mentioned before, like the business side, I'm amazed that anyone does it.
Some people love it. Some people just want to do that.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. For me personally, I find that not interesting. I love solving the problems. I love creating the problems, and I love solving them as well. I think that's the fun of games design, is creating problems to solve. And if you're creating the problems, then you're possibly going to enjoy solving them a little bit more.
So
But
speaking of that, you probably know that almost every time you made a game, I always wanted to make a computer to solve your games optimally. And I think this
Mhm.
started with the very first game that I knew of you when we met. 11123? Was it called like
Yeah,
that?
11123.
11123.
Yeah, with Aubrey.
With Aubrey Green, yes. So it was this weird game where basically you stack black and white, what's the name? Tokens. Ish.
Yeah, Othello tokens.
Yeah.
So they're black on one side, white on the other.
And you have cards to sort of reshuffle those ones. And I remember I was obsessed in making an AI that was winning every time. And believe it or not, I was obsessed with tiny islands as well. So I actually made an optimizer that takes any island and basically finds the maximum score you can get for that island, basically. And I have it on screen now. And
Mhm.
you know, I never went that far to make the proper graphics for it, or maybe I did and I don't remember. But so many experiments, I guess. But basically, it worked by finding an island and checking all the possible swaps between two elements until it increases the score. And so, you know, knowing all the elements, it can sort of knows how to sort of gradient descent up and
Yeah.
find the thing. It's not perfect. It's not 101, but I think it consistently gets way higher score than you would get with play. You can literally get like over 100 just by running it, and I find it very fun that every time you try to make a game, I've consistently tried to to make an AI to to play and break your game, but
Yeah.
that's
I mean, what was interesting with Tiny Islands was people were messaging me with like images of their spreadsheets and calculations for how they maximize their scores and what note systems they would use for sort of analyzing all the different results for each day and then working out what the highest score they could get was.
what the optimum.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I've
yeah.
seen a few of them, and I think it was quite nice. Now, I want to talk about another games of yours that I think
Hmm.
I don't think you reached the tiny island level, but the potential is there. Also for lawsuits, but and I probably know what I'm talking about. It's let's go build a dot dot
Yeah.
dot. Do you want to talk about this game while we see a video of it?
Yeah. I I just I think I saw a picture of some Lego instruction manuals um, online at some point, or maybe I was looking at Lego online, and I just really like the sort of flat aesthetics from the sort of 80s instruction manuals. And I was just curious initially that could I recreate that? Could I recreate that aesthetic? And then could I get the blocks to stack up properly and get the things to work? And then sort of just a game formed in terms of sort of like putting some really strong restrictions on it. And based on Tiny Islands, I sort of realized that kind of having a daily challenge was kind of a nice way to bring people back to your game regularly, because previously a lot of my games were kind of you would play them once and then you'd seen what's happened and that would be it. Like you've had your experience, you've got everything you could from it. But with Tiny Islands and Let's Go Builder, like a big part of that was this idea of a daily shuffle, this idea of sort of like coming back and everyone sharing that shuffle or that challenge. So with Let's Go Builder, it wasn't really a shuffle. It was more like let's all try and build a pair of sneakers
Out of
out of Lego
Lego.
today. And then also like the creativity in sort of realizing that people would solve all those problems with 20 bricks in very, very different ways.
Something I love about this game, well, sorry, this tiny game, is that the things that it asks you to build are not necessarily like objects sometimes. They're more like build an album cover,
Hmm.
and I was like, wow, like in a sense that I the you have to be very creative to imagine something that sort of abstract, I guess, to work in that kind of sense. And so my question is, how many objects do you actually have? How does it work? Does he have hundreds? What's the list?
I can't remember. I did when I first put it up. I think I had a list of about 50 objects, and then people started playing it, and I realized that I had to had to increase the list count. I think there's currently around 150 objects, and it's going to get to the point where if people are playing daily, it's going to repeat, and so I'll need to do an update at some point and sit down and generate a list of more objects to add to the game. But yeah, that's sort of like one of the things with games where you sort of realize you've created the system, you've sort of got the mechanisms for the game to work, and maybe even you've got a editor to put them together, or a simple way to put them together. So with Let's Go Builder, it was just I had to add things to an Excel spreadsheet and then copy them across. Or with so another game I did a while ago was Keep on Beat, which was a sort of like a game which mimicked a looper where you loop drum tracks, and that would sort of guide a little square around a grid, and you'd have to keep on the track by adding things to the loop. So that's really easy to, in a practical sense, easy to sort of like create a level, but from a design sense, it's really challenging and frustrating to have to design the levels or come up with the words and then generate a lot of different things and then put them in the right order. And again, that's where like I even struggle at that sort of level of doing things, where like beyond the system, beyond the mechanics and the gameplay, like where you sort of like doing level design, I start drifting off and wanting to do other projects.
I know, right? We are. I know, right? So let's while I do another sort of ASMR tea, James asked if we can hear more tea. I hope that's relaxing enough. Maybe I should open another channel. Oh, hi, Jason. Jason from Unity College is say that the Lego-ish games look like a pretty fun projects to build on many different ways. But I'm sure you can find the link in down below. I'm not a real YouTuber. How do you say? In the comment section? I don't know. In the description box? I don't know. Jason, you can find the link if you want to play it. I already put it there. So you know, with all David's other games. Now, something that I find it quite interesting is that in the same way Tiny Island started as a paper prototype, I don't know if we can say the same, but I feel that Let's Build started in a sort of similar way, because you have been posting for quite some time some sort of like small Lego diorama where you were trying to recreate film poster scenes. I have here a few, and you know, trying to guess, asking people to guess, you know, what movies you were. This is amazing. And if you haven't seen it yet, maybe you can post in the chat what do you think those are, or in the comments. Let's see what people think. Some of them are really creative. I didn't remember this one. And you know, oh god, I love the I'm not saying any names so people can sort of guess what I think. Some of them are very creative. And what I absolutely love about, you know, what you've done is that you've gone the opposite way compared to what Lego is doing now. I think that's my guess. I think that because you know, graphics has evolved so much, people now are demanding to see basically to have a Lego piece for everything. So you can't play Harry Potter if you do not have the Harry Potter head with the scar, you know. And I think that I have very mixed feelings about this, because part of me saying, oh, it's amazing that more people are playing Lego and they're expanding Lego onto things that are not just necessarily building houses, in cities, but they're integrating a building elements into things that don't usually build, like Harry Potter or Star Wars. You don't build Star Wars stuff. Now you do. So he adds a complete new element of storytelling and creativity. But at the same time, I'm really worried. Well, worried is a strong word. It's the fact that you lose that creative element of how can I make something out of something that there isn't there. And for example, I have on screen now your Pokemon, your sort of Pokemon challenge where you made, how many is it, 20? Yeah, you made 20 Pokemons out of Lego. And they have as little as one brick. And you have to guess what they are. So it's literally, it's Pico 8 and beyond. It's that kind of level of demaking. And I find it very interesting because in a way it's the very essence of Let's Build A. And again, the picture is now on screen. If you want to try to guess which Pokemons are those ones, I can try to guess. I don't know that many. They're all first generation because let's be honest, the one beyond first generation don't exist. They were a mistake. They're not canon. That's my take for today. Only the first generation Pokemons are valid. That's my old take.
That's how to end your YouTube channel straight away.
Exactly. Oh god, now it's all going down. Please don't unsubscribe after this. Only the one from the first Pokemon games are valid. And even so, I can't remember most of them. I'm sure there's a Pikachu, but I'm unsure which one it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's been a while since I've seen that picture. I think I just had like a box of Lego and I enjoyed playing with it and sort of like setting myself small challenges to try and make or recreate sort of different scenes or posters or things. And I found personally the fewer bricks I use and the more abstract this sort of creation was, the more it felt like I'd been successful at doing that. Like as soon as I started using lots of bricks, it started sort of getting into that uncanny valley where it just looked like a hideous mess, and you'd turn it sort of sideways and realize that you'd only been looking at it from one angle, and
yes,
it wasn't really a 3D sculpture. It was kind of like a thing from one view. So again, it's sort of like a limitation of my artistic capabilities is sort of like realizing I can't do high fidelity, so I will do abstract, low fidelity, really restricted palettes, restricted number of objects, restricted pen types, and stuff like that.
And I think even for games, I think that's amazing because basically it's the concept of Ludum Dare and game jams, designed by a limitation, oftentimes, but often like Ludum Dare, it's a theme. So it's like you can make a game about random theme, that people have chosen, and maybe there's a pattern in the themes that people think they can do in a couple of days. But I think it's way more interesting because it forces you, and it gives you a starting point. While otherwise, let's make a game. Anxiety. About what? And there's a comment from Jason saying, "I'm a terrible artist even with virtual Lego." Don't worry, we all are. Being consistently bad, it's the key to aesthetics. So
be consistently bad. I think sometimes, and this is something I show to my students who sort of say that they aren't good artists, and I say I am not a good artist, but I am consistently bad.
And that's what makes you good.
If you're consistent across your entire game, there's some little tips and tricks you can use, like always use the same sort of like sprite size, always use the same brush size when you're drawing. So try not to sort of like stretch things, so like the line thicknesses change. So if you can keep the line thickness constant if you've got lines, or just go geometric.
Just go hexagons, and you can't go wrong, right? Just go hexagons.
Well, hexagons are certainly one of the shapes that you can use.
So I just wanted to show the little diorama you did for Celeste. I think it's adorable. So it's on screen now, and basically there's the little character in Celeste,
Hmm.
And when she's jumping, you also change the hair so that
Yeah.
it's sort of you can see the hair going up while she's jumping. I think it's really adorable. I think kids today will hate it because they don't have the Lego Celeste brick, the exact wig.
There's a, I think there's two ways of looking at Lego. Like when I was a child and I played with Lego, I used to love rushing through the rule book as fast as I could, like trying to go from like the first page to the last page as fast as I could, following those instructions. Um, but there's two ways I think of doing Lego. There is just the joy of following instructions, and I think that's actually where I started with Let's Go Builder, and it went in a different direction. Um, Perhaps like I wasn't thinking about the Pokemons and posters that I've made in the past. I wanted to try and create a game experience, and this is like the whole game design thing where you start on one path and then the game pulls you in a different direction where you followed instructions. I wanted to recreate the sense of turning a page in an instruction manual and just doing exactly as the instructions told you to do without any puzzle or challenge to it. Just sort of seeing if you could make an experience which just sort of says, uh, go up and then you press the up button, but like in your own pace, like it's not a time difficulty. Maybe I'll go back to that initial idea, that initial seed at some point. Um, but yeah, the idea of just peacefully following instructions was one that I wanted to explore.
It's really nice, and you mentioned the word seed, so I'm trying to swiftly move on to another game.
I mean, we've had seed and hexagon, so
Well, yeah, I could have said that, but because we only have about like 15 minutes or so, and I'm really you've worked on many games that have hexagons, and I'm tempted to say maybe we should meet up again and have like a hexagon day. Is that something like hexagon day, like National Hexagon Day? We should make it. If not,
like the 6th of
right, that's
June, the
right.
6th of June,
The
the
six.
6th of June.
Oh no! Yeah, we can try. We can try maybe. It's officially Hexagon Day. So there's another game. Well, game is a strong word. There's another playful thing, as a term
Yeah,
you're
playful.
often using in class, that you've been working on, and I think it's quite interesting because so far we've seen a couple of games and I showing on screen each of your page. Those are all finished things. Those are all finished games. They're tiny, but they're finished. Something really interesting is seeing how you design something and how you get to something that it's finished. And you've been working, you've been open on Twitter sharing some videos of one of your projects that, let's call it Untitled Plant Game. Now it's a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So Untitled Plant Game is essentially a very weird, playful thing where you have plants and you cross-pollinate them, I guess. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think it just came. So we were talking about procedural generation at university with the students, and Jean, one of the other lecturers, had put together this really interesting presentation that I was sort of watching whilst he was streaming it to the students. And I'd also been thinking in the background, I wanted to make a game about houseplants and just sort of like the peaceful nature of houseplants. And I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but he sort of did some lectures on L systems and procedural generation. And we were talking about it in class. And as often happens whilst I'm sort of doing research to prepare lectures, I'm sort of inspired to go on and create something. So it just started sort of working out, could I make a houseplant generator? And I think I've got a rough idea of which way I want it to go in the long run. I'm not sure if it will go this way or if I'll even finish it. I might. It's getting to the point where it's getting slightly frustrating in terms of sort of like I did the fun bit, which was making making the plants and making the plants cross-pollinate by sharing their, I guess, their sort of seed, by just mixing up like elements of each plant. But I kind of want to make a really slow game where you might plant something and then it takes maybe a day to grow, and you can come back the next day, and when things are fully grown you can take a sample of them and add them to a database, and you can then take a couple of things from your database and plant that to see what grows and decide whether you want to keep it, and then you can start creating very slowly over a period of days or weeks the sort of house plants that you want based on the things that you've created. And that's the direction I want to go with it. But whether that happens or whether I go on to make something else, I don't know at this point.
And again, I think that it's really cute because it's super consistent, it's super simple, limited palette, limited shape, limited colors. I think it really works because of that. And then you just build with the limitation. I think it's really a great example because in a way we keep asking our students to do something small that they can do in a couple of weeks, and basically what I hope they will see is that every week you're making a new game, or every 2 weeks, and basically every 2 weeks you're also making a submission for an assignment basically. And I think that's really interesting. It's a really good example for I think for the students to see as well, because you're not asking them something that you're not willing to do yourself, I guess, or that you've never done yourself. So in a way I feel it's it for me specifically works really well in that kind of sense. And of course I'm very keen in seeing where these games move forward, also because I'm obsessed with procedural generation and genetics and stuff like that. And I had my L systems phase when I was a kid. I was crazy about L systems. So of course it's something that really resonates with me. So I was immediately interested. Now there's another thing that you're sort of well known for, at least in a certain environment, and this is your hot chocolate thread.
Yeah.
Now, I rescue from 2017. For the ones of you who don't know it, David loves hot chocolate, and he has been posting every week hot chocolates from around the place.
Yeah, that was a couple of winters ago.
That was a couple of... Why did you stop, David? Why? I need my hot chocolate. Those.
I think the furthest I travelled was... Well, I mean, I also went to places when I was abroad at conferences and stuff like that. But, I travelled, over 2 hours, 2.5 hours across London to start going to places. And I think I started to realise that I think I knew what the hot chocolate I wanted was, and I started making it at home.
David, but what about what we want? What about your audience want? We want more hot chocolate. Come on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's always that slow burning of what is the hot chocolate game?
Oh my god, it's true. You never made actually one.
Yeah, I don't know how it would work at all. I've got no idea where I'd start with a hot chocolate game.
Do you remember, many years ago, there was this Flash game where basically you had to make a cocktail and mix in drinks and ingredients and stuff? So maybe it could be like that, where you mix you boil the chocolate, you put a powder, you put the marshmallow.
You don't.
I don't know.
No.
I don't know how.
No, I'm a classicist when it comes to hot chocolate. It's chocolate and... well, now it's chocolate and oat milk, but yeah.
So, David, that's the idea. Wait. We have the idea for the hot chocolate games, and you're seeing this idea being created live, right? So please don't copy. Now I'm the idea guy. So it's a game where you have to make the hot chocolate for you. So basically, you have all this
for me?
Yes, you have all this. Well,
it's a puzzle game where you're given all these ingredients, and then you find out that the only correct answer is mixing chocolate and milk
Yeah,
together.
but you have to do it in the right ratio, with the right temperature, I know, with the right amount of foam and stuff. And basically, that's a tiny animation of you drinking the cup, and then like sort of with a sort of, and then you have to guess based on your judgments what you did wrong, and so David, this game needs to exist. We need this game.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite there yet for me. I'd rather just go and make a hot chocolate at the moment.
Well, no, please, David. It's
I
like
mean, not in summer.
it's almost
Although
30 degrees. Please, no.
When I was in Berlin for the Amaze Festival, I went for hot chocolate when it was like 35 degrees, just because I'd heard that this place was good. Fortunately, they had air conditioning, so
Okay,
it
so
worked.
yeah, so it was. I'm sure. I hope it was on the threads. So
Yeah, I think it's called Roche or something like that.
maybe I will
But
link
it
the
was
thread
just
as well for the people that are for the connoisseur of hot chocolate. So maybe you can guess. Now, David, we're almost out of time. So there's one question that I want to ask you, and it's the question that I keep asking to all the guests I have. Well, I have 3 guests, so
yeah.
I've asked it to all the guests. So that makes sense, right? So let's make a
Yeah.
tradition of it. So how many versions of Unity do you have installed, and what is the maximum number of Unity versions you had installed on your machine?
So, because we were having this conversation, I've got 2 versions of Unity installed. I normally have 1 version, and the only reason I update it is because my students would complain if they didn't get to update to a more recent version. I'd still be on Unity 5.
Oh, God. The shade.
Like, like, for me, none of the the only thing that's sort of like been good for me is nested prefabs.
Yes. Yes.
Other than that, I don't use any of the features that are there. I don't use the animator. I don't use the physics engine. I hardly use anything of it. I grew up programming on a BBC Micro.
So
like
hardcore.
the first time I saw Unity, when I had to start learning it in order to teach students, I was like, "What is all of this? Why is this all here?"
So
And now I'm used to it, and it's really, really helpful and good, and it's like practical. But like, give me a blank document where I could just type text.
we can confidently say that real game developers don't use Box2D. they implement their own physics engine.
Yeah, I mean, I think with you just have to be aware of what it does and how it works, and that's where I struggled with it personally, was I didn't know quite how it worked. So, like, you'll probably notice from a lot of my games, they're on grids, and that's because I know stuff is in a grid. Like, if it's in position 0, 1, or 5, 3, I can control it. It gets a bit harder for me to understand when things are sort of like possibly somewhere.
With some random rotation, yeah. But David, I think that we've been chatting for more or less 1 hour, so I think I've been kidnapped you for quite long enough. But it was really interesting. I think that the work you've been doing at LCC, I think it's amazing. I have sort of given up on academia before you sort of offer me the position to come back. So I think it's also thanks to you that I sort of re-enter academia. So it's a big, of course, thank you for me, because I was pretty much done. The stories. I was pretty much done at a certain point with academia. So it was really nice to see someone doing the things in a way that I think, in a way that I would have wanted to do that myself. So it was it was really good, and I think that the evidence of that is that your students are doing really well. Hopefully they like what they're doing. And some of them managed to make really awesome stuff. Like Jai, he's doing awesome stuff. Maybe I should get him as well on one of those episodes.
Yeah, definitely.
and some of them are really, really creative, and it's something that I don't see in many other institutions. So really, I really wanted to say thank you for all the work that you're doing, and as I think coming to one of the final year degree show is probably the best way to see what I'm talking about. So at least that's definitely true. So well, thank you so much for being with me tonight or today, depending on people are watching, I guess. It was my pleasure to have you here, and hopefully when a few other games of yours are completed, I'm sure in a few months we can have another chat, and hopefully you will have 15 more games to show. And maybe let's see if we can do something for Hexagon Day, National Hexagon Day.
Yeah.
It's already done.
Thanks for having me.
It's already done. Thank you so much, David.
All right, thank you.
So before we close the show and I say goodbye to everyone, I just wanted to really, really thank you, all the people that have been supporting this channel, have been supporting me, my work, online. I often do a lot of tutorials, and it's thanks to people on Patreon that I can do both the tutorials and the show like this. Something that you've probably seen with all the people that I've invited so far is that we all have full-time jobs and we do all those kind of extra thing as extra. So it's really with the support of these people that it's really possible for us to keep doing this. So thank you so much to all the people that really made this possible. Beyond behind every game you've seen, including David one's, there are hundreds, if not thousands of hours spent working and doing things. So I think we should really support the people that are doing stuff you like, because especially in a time like this, it's really easy for those people to stop doing the things they love and things that you love if unfortunately we don't get we don't get enough support, unfortunately. Now, that being said, I also want to introduce the guest from next week. As you know, I think that this show works really, really better when we have guests. So basically, next week we are going to have a lovely chat with Jerry Belich. Some of you might know him as Jerrytron online. He's also the creator of Choosatron, which was one of the sort of first alt control thing to really take off. He's a game designer and he has a lot of experience designing Escape the Room. Lovely ones if you have a chance to see them. And he literally has decades of experience in a variety of different fields, not all of them related to game development. He's also a quite relevant figure in the alt control scene. I think that on his Twitter bio he says alt control wizard, which I can definitely confirm. It is true. So hopefully next week we will have a chance to talk to him as well. So if you have any question, please feel free to leave it down below, and I will make sure to ask him. And with that being said, thank you so much for being here tonight or today, and I hope to see you next week as well. Bye.